Dude, welcome back to Hanging Out with the Dudes in Sports podcast. I'm your host, PC. We've got a great show for you today. But I want to introduce the guys as we always do here. Unfortunately, the main man from way out west is severely out west on vacation, so he's having a great time out here. But we're going to have a Missouri showdown kind of here, and we're going to have K-Stelt and then Mr. Howard here. So first, let's introduce the man from the Arch Town, Mr. Howard. How are you doing today, sir?
Town. It is, well, I went and watched the home opener outside today, or the St. Louis Cardinals, and not at the stadium, just at a local bar, and I went also to watch a little bit of the Blues and Predators. It's been all sorts of sports going on. And all in the midst of it this weekend, the highlight is the two Final Four for men and women's college basketball. And in the men's right now, it's down to the final wire. So it's time to really see who is basically going to win the UConn Invitational.
Yeah, 100%. The men's basketball tournament is going to be great. The women's has kept my attention a lot. But let's go to the other guy from Missouri, Mr. K-Stelt. How are you doing today?
I'm here finally back on the pod. Just excited to see what we got going on in the Final Four weekend in Arizona. So I'm excited. I'm ready to do my predictions and whatever you want me to do, Sir PC.
Hey, we're just glad Mr. K-Stelt, recovered from his illness. Okay, it was a long, hard battle for him. So we're glad he's back. Unfortunately, we are missing our key piece from main man from way out west, but it is what it is at this point. So we're going to go over the Final Four. Okay, so first off, I want to ask you guys, what are your biggest upsets that you figured out from this year's tournament? Let's go to Mr. Howard here first. What do you think? What's your biggest upset?
The biggest upset this year, I think, is if we really want to go around to it, I was really impressed with how Grand Canyon pulled off their first round victory. And, actually, what I really liked was Oakland and Kentucky's, because that was probably the one, because Grand Canyon was a solid team this year, so I shouldn't give them too much of a downplay of their opponent, but they did get the upset as well. But I really think Oakland really shocked the most because, it's just like a year that there's no way Calipari could do it. Calipari's team was like, it's going to be first round or they're going to go to the Final Four. Their offense is great, but Oakland, out of all teams, it seemed like they were safe. Still didn't get through it. Jack Golke was nuts. That story was really good, even though it was for one win. It was huge, and they ended up being taken down by the now Cinderella. So I think Oakland and Kentucky was probably my upset.
Yeah, Jack Golick was awesome this year. It was awesome to see him play and shoot the three-pointer like that. It's Golke. Yeah, excuse me. Sorry, it's Golke. Yeah, I think that's how you pronounce it. Sorry if I mispronounce it. Pardon me, but he was awesome to watch. He was lighting it up from the three-pointer. That Kempe story was awesome that he first got there and he was able to get a win. Makes it even a better story. Mr. K-Stelt, sir, do you have any other ones that you think were great upsets of this tournament?
Yeah, the biggest one was Yale and going against Auburn. Auburn kind of handled teams that were worse than them statistically. Yale was kind of hopping on this train with a bandage and a crutch, and they just took Auburn and said, "You're not winning this game." Beat them by 2. I thought Auburn was going to, do some damage in the East, but got knocked out by Yale. I thought that was the biggest upset, in my opinion, by statistic-wise, because Auburn was just so good offensively. But I did watch Yale play KU in Allen Fieldhouse to a pretty close game, so I probably should have known that from the beginning. But yeah, Yale Auburn, big upset. Didn't have that in my bracket at all.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. Yale was honestly one of those teams that barely actually escaped into the tournament because of the Brown miscue in the conference tournament, and they were able to get a win, which is super great. My upset, or my favorite one, was obviously the NC State run. I think they weren't an upset for a lot of the rounds, but now they've continued to be the biggest underdog, making it all the way to the Final Four. So I think that's my biggest upset story. So, I want to go around. Either one of you can go first. Just kind of give me whatever you got. But what's your one shining moment from this year's tournament so far?
Man, it may be something that there's a lot out there now, but I still really just can't believe like what happened at Texas A&M and Houston game. That was, I think, like March Madness to a peak when he went and just buried that shot, just bounced on the ground a couple of times, put it up in the air, going to overtime. That was Houston still pulled out the win, which like happens in March Madness, but it was still a good game, and that was really fun to watch. So I think that's my one shining moment.
Yeah, I remember watching that game too. It was such a high paced game, and that shot was incredible. Obviously Houston pulled it out in the end, but just a phenomenal team. Texas A&M. They were actually my pick to win the SEC, but obviously I was wrong. Mr. K-Stelt, do you have a one shining moment that you really enjoyed?
Yeah, I think Clemson's win over Arizona was huge. I don't think a lot of people had Clemson going that far except for P4. P4 liked Clemson because he liked Gerard from Syracuse last year, transferred over to Clemson. I thought Arizona was going to make it to the Final Four, but dude, I don't know. The shot selection in that game by a couple of the Arizona players was crazy. That felt like some one shining moment. Not like in the good way, but when they're all crying and they're going to put that shot in there and they're going to go, "What? Who is taking that like one-footed three-pointer, like something I do
Your
in
one
like the
shining
March?"
moment is Arizona's
Yeah.
fail.
Yeah, their fail, which I'm not like discrediting Arizona, but man, that was Clemson can't. Yeah, Clemson just, dude, they had some studs. They had some studs on the team, and they deserve to go to the Elite Eight. So that was my one shining moment, Clemson over Arizona.
So what my one shining moment was actually, you always see in that, it's like the people that are like crying and stuff. My one shining moment is Kenzie Tominaga crying for Nebraska. And the only reason it is because Nebraska finally made it to the tournament, and they choked.
They choked hard.
And I really wanted to see them win. I really, really did. That was the team I wanted to see win. And they choked. So my one shining moment is going to be Kenzie Tominaga crying because Nebraska still doesn't have a win in the NCAA tournament. How are you a Power 5 conference team and you don't have a win in the NCAA tournament? Kenzie Tominaga, great player, kind of like Steph Curry, but couldn't get the job done in the end. But we have our Final Four teams. They are, obviously, the number one seed, UConn Huskies, Donovan Clingan, Caravan also. You cannot forget about Tristan Newton as well. This team has dominated every single team that they played against, beating teams by an average of over 17 points per their matchups, maybe even a little bit higher than that. But they have been severely dominant. Then we also have the Purdue Boilermakers, also number one seed, coming out with the 7'4" giant Zach Edey. Going to be back-to-back National Player of the Year kind of players. Then we've got Alabama out of the SEC with a high-powered offense that just keeps going. You got Shed, you got Grant Nelson. That team is going to be ready on offense. Let's see if their defense can hold up. We don't know, but that'll be a fantastic matchup against UConn. And then do not forget about our Cinderella that's not really a Cinderella because he's in a Power 5 conference, the North Carolina State Wolfpack, who are led by, I like to call DJ Squared, DJ Burns Jr. and DJ Horn. Those guys are going to play against the monster 7'4" Zach Edey. So, let's look a little bit back on each team's little bit of their back pace from the tournament. Okay, so let's look back a little bit. And how do you think? We talked about UConn already a little bit. Let's talk about Purdue. How was their matchups? How did you think they did getting through their side of the bracket?
Yeah, I think Purdue's really handled themselves pretty well. They've gone and done a solid job in the end, had a couple of close ones in the run, but at the same time, Lance Jones has done really well in being the X factor for this team. I've really liked his performance, and they've knocked shots down this tournament when Zach Edey kind of is in tough moments. I mean, he had a 40-point game in his last game, but like 22 of them were free throws.
Yeah, he had like 25
like,
free throws or something like that in the Elite Eight game. It was nuts.
yeah, like he was at the line more than he was actually shooting from the floor. So it's just that's kind of how it is with him. But the rest of his team's like actually knocking down shots, and I think that's what's giving Edey the leeway. Unlike Fairleigh Dickinson last year, when nobody was knocking down shots, so he was counted upon and just completely fell out of line. So I think Purdue's done really well and improved this year, and they deserve to have a strengthened argument for why they could win it all. But I think it'll still be tough going forward.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, I think so. They beat Utah State. Danny Sprinkle, great coach, but they handled them pretty easily. Gonzaga, they handled pretty easily. The big test was against Tennessee in the Elite Eight, and it seemed like Zach Edey really took over there. He had 40 points in that game. Yes, he did shoot about 25 free throws, but how do you? I mean, he's 7'4". I mean, it's super hard to guard somebody like that. He's gonna get to the line, so he made those free throws and ended up squeezing it out of past Tennessee. So I thought it was a great overall run there for Purdue. So let's go look at UConn's opponent now. Out of the West is the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, K-Stelt, how do you think the Alabama Crimson Tide have done in their path to the Final Four in the desert of Arizona?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Alabama's the highest scoring team, I think, in the tournament, or coming into the tournament. They're physical, and they shoot well. They make a lot of buckets. Their defense is a little tricky. They had Charleston. That was you could tell by that game. The score was 109-96, so they didn't really care about defense. Grand Canyon, they kind of locked it down a little bit. The guard play was similar. Fast, aggressive guard play, tall guys, beating them by 11. Alabama, North Carolina, that was a close one. North Carolina just, kind of fumbled. Yeah, it was just R.J. Davis just didn't have a great game. And Clemson, I mean, dude, that game was tough too. Clemson had just great post play. I think for Alabama's case, they definitely deserve to be here. They've played well. They've played aggressive. And I think there's no better opponent for them to play than UConn. They're actually pretty similar teams. One just has less losses than the other. But when we're talking about offensive firepower, both teams are fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like, Alabama's been really, really great on the offensive end all year, so it's really exciting to see it. But now we got to talk about the number 11 seed. The guys from the ACC that nobody saw coming. The NC State, or North Carolina State, Wolfpack, have come through the South region with huge victories. Mr. Howard, how do you think the NC State Wolfpack have gotten this far?
Well, to start off, I mean, as you mentioned earlier, the DJ duo is really good in general. Burns has been a guy that over at Winthrop, he was completely dominant over there, and they really a really solid team. I think the 2021 season he was on that team. Really good year. They had like 3 regular season losses going into the championship game in their tournament, 3 or 4. But really good, and he's just a baller. I mean, he's got that old style, big guy. He's just a perfect combo in the college ball era. And I also think that they got a good one, Diarra. Their front court in general with Burns and Diarra is very talented. And it's pretty crazy just kind of how Keats was on the hot seat going before the ACC tournament even started, and like barely kind of looked bad against a Louisville team that was completely lost before the offseason. And now they're just killing it and one of the Final Four teams.
Yeah, the NC State Wolfpack, I love the DJ Squared. I think those guys are super great. So, we've given you a little bit of a preview. So now the dudes are going to pick who's going to win the Final Four games. The first matchup is going to be the UConn Huskies versus the Alabama Crimson Tide. So, let's go to Mr. K-Stelt. Who do you think is going to win? Is it going to be the team that's been dominating everybody or the team that has outscored everybody?
So UConn right now is favored 11.5 points over Alabama. That's pretty high, given that the matchup predictor that ESPN has UConn winning 72%. Honestly, at this point, I don't really know if I can predict stats. I understand that UConn just plays a great style of basketball, but I don't really care about the style of basketball. I'm going to talk about how their coach is a big fat whiny baby and acts like he is an underdog when he is one of the greatest college basketball teams we've seen in the past 2 decades. He's up there. All those crazy stats that you guys like to look at, this UConn team is a unbelievable team, and they're crying about planes not being able to take off because of the weather, which makes no sense.
Hey, it's a bad situation. It's a rough situation.
It is a bad situation, but whose fault is it? Are we blaming people?
It sucks, but that's ammunition that they need. It's like Saban,
and then I'm seeing barstools out here saying, "Oh, this team, they're complaining about the service they're getting and blah blah blah." It doesn't matter. No one cares. Stop complaining. You're the best team. Go in there and dominate like you should. Dan Hurley was talking about how they had an awful stretch in the East, talking about all these teams being good. All of those teams that they played matched up perfectly against them. Small, weak, and didn't have enough firepower. And they played in Brooklyn, which is in the backyard of UConn. And then they played in Boston. And they talk about how they're in a bad environment. They're not in a bad environment. That is like Kansas playing their first 2 games of the tournament in Wichita, and then the Elite 8 and 16 game in Kansas City. And we're going, man, we had a really tough time. We don't have a lot of people coming out. It's going to be a really tough game to get through. Stop being the victim. I don't care. I understand if that's a way to get your guys motivated and play really hard. I get that, but it looks like you're a big fat whiny baby. You have the opportunity to go back to back, and it hasn't been done since the Florida Gators in the mid-2000s.
07-08, baby. Joaquin Noah, shout out.
Acting like a baby, Dan Hurley. I understand your favorite athlete of all time is George Brett. I appreciate you, and I appreciate how great of a coach you are. But you're a baby. You whine about people on the sidelines. That is the official's job to take care of. Stop it, man. Stop Dan Hurley. I hope they lose, bro. I hope they lose. Alabama ain't give nothing but a piss about the
So obviously, Mr. K-Stelt, after that long rant, he's picking the Alabama Crimson Tide with the upset. Mr. Howard, are you going to agree with this insanity, or are you going to get back on the rocker?
I mean, yeah, I can't just downgrade UConn and make that my reason for them Bama beating them, but I like the Bama team. They've had a lot of momentum going into this year, but I mean, yeah, this is just the ammunition. This is going to be the 2020s are basically like the Saban era when he was at Bama. It's just that mentality, that's sociopathic mentality of this is against us, and we're going to dominate. We are going to show, in the what was it called, the era for football. I can't think of it off the top of my head. Anyway, it's like the FBS era or something. Anyways, back in the older days of the early 2010s, Saban was a nutcase in the rankings and had to be a top no matter what. Killed his opponents. This is the UConn team. They just kill their opponents no matter what. constantly playing till the final whistle blows. And I think that this is just a team that's gonna just steamroll their way into a championship potentially, but it just, yeah, it's gonna take a lot for Bama. I don't think Bama's physical enough to take them down, but we'll see. We'll see.
I also have one other thing that doesn't involve whining and stuff like that. Alabama plays very similar when it comes to the physicality level of UConn. UConn has not played a physical team like Alabama at all in probably the past, 10 games they played. Alabama, they play hard, they are physical, and they will play exactly the way that UConn plays against them.
Bama
Hard,
is the
physical,
least
not a lot of fouls.
physical in the Final Four right now.
How?
Their defense
How?
is not. Grant Nelson has
No.
been.
I'm not talking
not
about
physical.
no. It's a physical
They faced
ball.
better at
Physical
Illinois. They faced better at Illinois.
No, Illinois was not more physical than Alabama. I promise you. They're gonna foul a lot.
Grant Nelson is going to get absolutely smoked, and I think we completely see that in this game. He's going to go from a late first round projection right now to potentially bottom of the second round.
How many times, and I'm going to agree with Howard on this instance, okay? Because honestly, right, UConn, out of the two tournament games, right, or not tournament games, the two tournament seasons, what is the closest they've been? What, 10 points? Like, come on, what are we talking about here? Look, I get it. Like, Alabama has great offensive power. I'm not denying that Grant Nelson's a dog on the defensive end. You know, shout out NDSU. And then they've got Jamal Shedd, who's great. And Estrada is also a great shooter. But we're talking about UConn here. Okay, we're not talking about KU with Hunter Dickinson.
Yeah,
Right?
I watched KU beat this UConn team. I watched that garbage KU team beat UConn. I watched them beat them.
Hold on, because that was in Allen Fieldhouse. Okay, Kansas is a different monster in Allen Fieldhouse.
The Tide roll. They show up. They roll, baby.
Look, and you know what? I hope that guy's bracket is perfect. I really do. That'd be great. That'd be a great story.
He only picked Bama. That's it.
No, he picked Yale. He picked Yale over Auburn.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Yeah, that's right. So, but I honestly am not gonna. I'm not gonna because he doesn't like Auburn. He's an Alabama guy.
Oh.
Wow! All right, Kyle is finally here. So, but I also agree with Mr. Howard here. I think UConn is going to bulldoze Alabama because of their not as great defense. Grant Nelson's going to be a factor, but they dismantled an Illinois team that was looking phenomenal. Like, it wasn't even a close game. So, I'm just going to UConn. But let's go to the other side of the bracket. Going to the other side now, are we going to pick the 7'4" monster in Zach Edey and the Purdue Boilermakers, or are we going to pick the Cinderella that's not really a Cinderella because they're in a Power 5 conference, NC State? Howard, what do you think first? Who's going to win, NC State or Purdue?
I think that this one is going to be fun because, I mean, it's like what everybody's talking about. You got Edey versus DJ Burns. But DJ Horn against Lance Jones is going to be fun, too. Matt Painter's got a solid squad going on right now with shooting. NC State's on an absolute heater themselves. They really got all the matches to go into this one. Zach Edey's going to have to really find a way how to get around that Bilopowski couldn't do against the NC State team, and I think that it's going to be tough. And you know what, man? I think this is going to set up for a David and Goliath final matchup. I think NC State's going to keep the ball rolling.
Mr. Howard here picking the Cinderella that's not a Cinderella because they're in a Power 5, NC State, DJ squared, K-Stelt. Do you agree, or are you going with the 7'4" monster, Zach Edey and the Purdue Boilermakers?
Purdue is 9.5 favored. The ESPN matchup predictor. Can you guys see that? Probably not. Because they're almost the same color of the Boilermakers tan. The Wolfpack have a 10% chance according to the ESPN I'm not saying that NC State is a bad team. They're playing fantastic ball. They've hit a lot more threes than they normally do. Normally they're a team that likes to get their points in the paint, especially with DJ Burns. That guy's just a stud. It's going to come down to every other way that Purdue wins, and that's Zach Edey getting fouls, and that's the entire team getting fouls. As an official, I literally don't know how, like, you can call, like, you can, like, ref a game with this 7-foot monster, because he's so big. He travels every time, but you can't call the travel every time because all these big guys do it nowadays. They get the ball and then they take like 3 different steps and shuffle in. And DJ Burns, there's just no way I think DJ's going to be able to just not foul him. I've seen it too many times. He shot 25 free throws. He shot 25 free throws. That is insane. And it's not like he just shot 25 free throws. That's the only time he's done. No, he does this every single game. And most of the time is because he's so freaking big, and guys will just bump him once and he falls down like a tree that the lumberjack just cut down. It's so tough to play against him because he's not that. I mean, he is a physical guy, but at the end of the day, his arms are so long. It's like the physics on him is impossible to guard him. I just don't understand it. So I think Purdue's going to win it just based off of how many fouls they get all the time, and they hit their free throws.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Purdue's a threat here. 7'4" Zach Edey, had 40 points last game. The game against Tennessee, he played extremely well. 40 points is a lot, but he also was just like dominant the entire game. Shout out to Dalton Connect in Tennessee. What a phenomenal player, top 10, 15 type player. But I think Zach Edey's going to be great. Braden Smith is a all Big Ten player this year, and as a point guard, and he has really developed into being an actual great guard instead of just being a good guard from like he was last season when they got upset by a 16 seed. And then they got Fletcher Lawyer over there also on the other guard position who also can shoot the ball really, really well. They also got a bunch of other guys that are very elite. Purdue is the guy that you normally pick, but I'm picking the Cinderella. That's not really a Cinderella because they're in a Power 5 conference, NC State. Both matchups are going to be great. But let's pick our national champion. So out of the 4 teams, who do you think is going to be the king of the mountain? Let's start off with Mr. K-Stelt. Who do you think is going to be our national champion this year?
So, I will say this. There is a stat that is one that ends up being 100%. Every team that is a number 1 team that loses the previous year to a 16 seed comes back the next season and wins the championship, and that is at 100% rate. 100% of the time that happens. And that's why Purdue is going to win.
UConn has been a predominantly good school throughout its history. Dan Hurley trying to look for that back-to-back. Howard, do you think Mr. Hurley's going to be the next guy to go back-to-back, or are you picking another team?
I think that this could be a really fun matchup. Either or, NC State or Purdue, in my opinion. I think a David Goliath is always an interesting one, even though a lot of times doesn't turn out good. But if it does, it's amazing. And then at the same time, Purdue is going to come down to really important of the Edey and Klingon giant matchup. And I think Klingon's a way better basketball player than Zach Edey personally. And I think at least talent-wise. And I think that will be really tough for Edey. That would probably be Edey's toughest matchup no matter what that he could possibly come in terms with. And UConn just plays a really physical, it is just a scary team. Especially after seeing the Illinois game, I had a little doubt about UConn. Honestly, I was like, they have had shown weaknesses, but it's true after the Illinois game. It's going to take a team's best game of the season on UConn's down day to even
like a time, like a day that's like you would win 9 out of the 10 times. You have to win.
Yeah,
like, one
exactly.
time to
Like
do
it's
it.
just so little with UConn. It's a UConn Invitational. It feels like
They
just ever
gotta
since this
keep the
came
game
in.
close. They gotta keep it close.
I don't know who's
That's
going to
what's
keep it
tough. I
close.
mean, like out the gate, it was a
Nobody has
2 point
proven
game.
that they've been able to
It was a
get it.
2 point
If UConn
game.
gets into
Close.
foul trouble, it'll be a close game.
That's a Hail Mary, man. That's what's
really-
what's
But
tough
that's
is
the thing, is
the
that,
other
like, we
team
don't-
is what gets into foul trouble fast because they try to match it and UConn's just too fast.
I mean, I'm on Howard's side on this. I believe UConn is going to go to the championship and going to win the whole thing. Now, I think I picked NC State because I really enjoy NC State, so I think it'll be a blowout. But if Purdue were to able to get over that hurdle, which I could totally see them doing, I think it'd be a great matchup. But I honestly think Tristan Newton, going from a 0-star high school, is a better point guard than Braden Smith. I love Braden Smith. I think Braden Smith is a phenomenal player, but I would take Tristan Newton over Braden Smith.
I would trade Tristan Newton over almost any player in the country.
Yeah, I hope that we get the best Final Four out of the Phoenix that we can get. So, those are the Dude's picks. Let's go over them one more time. Mr. K-Stelt has picked the Purdue Boilermakers to be your 2024 NCAA Championship winners, and myself and Mr. Howard are going with the UConn Huskies. So, before we wrap up here, we kind of wanted to look towards next season. And look a little bit at some of these big transfers that are coming up. Obviously, the transfer portal is already open, which is kind of a controversial rule right now. You know, some people think that maybe the transfer portal should open after the NCAA tournament, but who are we? We're not the professionals. We have no idea what's going on. We just kind of report on things and talk about it. So, we're going to talk about some of the biggest transfers. Let's go to Mr. Howard, do you have any transfers that you think could be a good fit for a team and could deserve a new home?
I think a lot that have already taken place, at least at the time we are filming this, I think have been solid. Is KU making some moves with Zeke Mayo, and I like what they got from also getting in Riley Kugel from Florida. That was a really good get. And Doug McDaniel, that was a good kind of get back. I like that one as well. I really like what Louisville is doing since they got Pat Kelsey from Charleston. They got Renee Smith, who is a great shooter from Charleston. And they just got some great talent coming over to Louisville right now. And it's a pretty solid group. I didn't like the UCLA one. That one was weird because that's not UCLA style to get kind of ISO hooper like Sky Clark. But yeah, that was an interesting one. I don't think it's going to work out. Everyone says Keon Johnson.
Keon Johnson?
Oh, for Louisville?
No, is
Yes.
yeah.
Keon Johnson as well. And I think that team's going to be really solid this year. And next year, like compared to what they were, they're going to be an interesting group. So I really like that one, and yeah, I'm excited to see what goes on the rest because there's a good amount already out there.
Who do you think Arkansas gets?
We're gonna go to the new coaching hires. Just go real quick. We're gonna wrap this up here real soon. But the new coaching hires. Howard, do you like any of these new coaching hires? Who's your favorite new coach, and how do you think they're gonna do with that program?
I already spilled a little earlier, but Charleston, I think, still has something really good going on. It was a wild card that they got Chris Mack, which was kind of interesting tenure, interesting tenure, and I think that he did pretty well at Xavier, obviously, when I was kind of becoming a fan of them once LSU was kind of doing bad. But right now, I think it is the guy that came from Charleston to Louisville. And Pat Kelsey is, I think, a really good coach. His style of play is incredible, how just diverse of scoring options he has on his team. He can make his team really deep. Hopefully he can get that depth, and right now they've got a lot of good transfers. So I think they'll do really good in making that adjustment to the next level in the ACC.
Yeah, I also really like Pat Kelsey's team. He's done a really great job over there at Charleston, and I think he's going to do really good things for this team that has really kind of been an embarrassment the past few years, so hopefully he can turn that thing around. Mr. K-Stelt, since you were so busy hanging out with the dog in the background, who is your coaching hire? Who do you like?
No. Yeah, I think Sprinkle to Washington is nuts.
So my new coach hire was obviously going to be the Sprinklinator or Danny Sprinkle, okay, the Utah State coach. Is now up at Washington. Washington's going to the Big Ten. Bigger market for him, being able to actually do a lot of phenomenal things there. Really great hire by the Washington Huskies. So keep out for them. Also, in the short term, watch out for Darian DeVries in West Virginia. His son is phenomenal. They just just made the tournament at Drake, and I think he's really going to build something around that team. So watch out for them in the 2024-2025 season to maybe be a little bit of an underdog in the Big 12. All right, so that's it for the Dudes in Sports. Listen, hey, this is our second episode ever. Okay, second episode ever. Listen, we're figuring things out. We had episode 0, which didn't count for technically, and we have 1, and this is now 2.
Second.
No. I'm right. It's episode 2. His second episode because he got sick. Okay, but hey, prayers up. Thank God that he's feeling better. You know, we were really worried about Mr. K-Stelt. We're hoping that the main man from way out west is having a phenomenal time on his vacation out there. But we're gonna wrap this up here. As always, we're gonna do a little outro. So, Mr. Howard, what's your last word for the people?
Man, it is April. March Madness has carried over. It's the final stages. The men's is popping. The women's is fun. The Iowa and LSU had the most views since like the 2018 Eastern Conference Finals for basketball in America, at least, which is crazy. And like men's is also having a solid story with North Carolina State, and UConn's been dominating, but we don't know who's going to win. It's March. It's going to be good for both sides, and I'm just excited to see what goes down.
That's the greatness from Mr. Howard himself. Mr. K-Stelt, do you have any words of wisdom to drop on our great listeners to end this podcast?
I will say this is a fun time. I always like the Final Fours. I would like it a lot if KU was in it, but they stink this year just because Kevin McCullough got injured. I'm excited to see how it will work out. I will say this last thing. Roll Tide, and I am better than Caitlin Clark. I can beat her in a one-on-one easily. I don't care.
It's the second one ever. Like, subscribe, and have a great time on the rest of your day. The dudes are out.
And I'm better, Caitlin.